Peter Blake is the superintendent of schools in Rome. Peter, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
So what was there one thing that made you say we got to wait? Or is it just collectively a bunch of different factors?
Well, it's definitely a collective bunch of factors. I think the one thing that really triggered our conversation decision-making was when the governor made his school opening announcement that one Friday. He specifically mentioned that districts have the opportunity to make the decision that's best suited for their community and their schools.
Yeah.
And we interpreted that as we had the green light to do whatever it is we needed to do to be safe and keep our community safe and healthy, which was not what I don't think many districts were expecting him to give districts that latitude.
Yeah.
But when he said that, we carefully examined what it would take to bring kids in on a part-time basis. And as you've already mentioned, when you add up all of the moving parts, there's not enough time, there's not enough resources. It can be done, but it won't be done well, and it certainly won't be what parents, I think, are expecting in their head.
Yeah. I think the question that so many teachers are worried about is how do I teach in a classroom, especially with the younger kids? How do I teach in the classroom? Also, at times I have to be teaching online. Are those kids going to be there? That alone is going to be very difficult. You haven't even gotten to the transportation and the ventilation and everything else, right?
Yeah, correct. And, that's one of the big things we've been trying to help people understand is that a school district's main function is educating children, right? That's our main function. And just that pure example you just highlighted right there, can teachers teach kids in front of them in a room and do some remote stuff at the same time? They probably could, but they're not going to be able to do that with a few days of training and a couple weeks to prepare on top of learning all of the new health and safety requirements. Those are things that teachers have never had to do. And while teachers tend to be superheroes and come through in the clutch time and time again, at the same time, if their minds are not free of stress and anxiety, they're not going to be effective at anything. And it will just be a colossal disservice to kids to try and force them into classrooms quickly without having the staff prepared to be able to work with them.
Yeah.
Peter, if I can say, I certainly understand the concern, but some would argue it's a colossal disservice to kids 5, 6, 8, 10 years old to put them in front of a laptop all day and try to teach them what they would typically learn in a completely different environment. How do you balance what children can learn and absorb and how they pay attention learning on a laptop or on a phone or whatever it might be versus, getting a real value out of that experience, a real learning experience?
Yeah, that's a great question and a really good point, and it comes up often when we're talking to our elementary teachers and our parents. The key being, again, just like the spring, teachers should not be replicating the experience that a kid has in the classroom on the computer. So, for a young student, 5, 6, 7 years old, they shouldn't be on a computer for 5 or 6 hours during the day. Maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours of computer time with the teacher, some small group stuff. But teachers will be providing families and kids with activities to do that at home they're able to do those activities, learn the skills that they need through that activity, and then on another day demonstrate that they've learned the knowledge by having a conversation or some form of a light assessment with the teacher. But you're absolutely right. Anybody, and I don't know any teachers that are trying to do that, replicate the entire day online for especially elementary age students. But there are very creative ways that teachers can help families at home in terms by providing lessons and or assignments that kids are doing activities throughout their house to learn the skill or the content of which we're trying to get at.
Did you survey teachers to find out how many, in your decision-making process, did it include like a survey, what percentage of teachers want to come back to the classroom or at what time it would be appropriate to come back to a classroom?
We did a preliminary survey in middle of July for all of our staff, not just our teachers, but our entire staff across the district. Didn't matter what their job title was or function. And based on that survey at that time, roughly 80% of staff wanted to come back and work in person. Those people that fell into the 20% category, they had a medical reasoning for not wanting to attend or a pregnancy, a young child, something of that nature. Once I think schools started to reopen across the country, and you started seeing some other things. I'm not so certain that 80% would have held true. But we didn't re-survey the staff because when we started looking at what it would take to do the hybrid piece and all of the new things that staff would have to be required to do to pull this off, and if you just read social media from around the country and the stress that teachers were under, it was obvious that it was not going to be as successful as people wanted it to be. People are going to be mad one way or the other. We kind of opted to have them be mad at us in August and put all of our eggs and focus on one task right now versus trying to split everybody's focus in many areas.
I think initially the hybrid model seemed to be a great answer. But when you start digging in, it becomes almost something that I feel, and all I am is a husband of a teacher. So I'm probably a little biased. I'm sure people will be telling me that on Facebook later today. But I do feel that you got to spend the money. That's the only way you're going to pull this off because there are factors that have to be in play. You got to have probably another teacher in the classroom or someone who can handle the online aspect. And then because especially in elementary, you've got, when you put your attention to the computer, little Johnny's now walking on the desk. And that's just what kindergartners and first graders do. So, but on top of that, then you have to have a parent or someone at home to make sure that the kid is paying attention, especially at those early ages. I don't see how the hybrid model works for us in the grammar school age group.
Yeah, it's very challenging. I agree with you. I've tried to help the community understand that a hybrid model is by far the most costly model that exists.
Yeah.
When you start adding up all the associated costs, it's not like operating a normal school day. I don't know if you're aware, but we did try to. Our goal was to have our elementary schools in 5 days a week.
Yeah, I saw that.
Knowing that our schools could handle about 70% capacity of the students. And, like I think many communities, overwhelmingly, our parents want their kids in school. And so based on that results, there was no way we're going to be able to. We're well over 70% of those that want to attend in-school learning. We just weren't going to be able to do it. In some of our school buildings, we're approaching so many students that want to return out of the general population that even the 2 days on, 3 days off model wouldn't work. We would almost have to do 1 day on, 4 days off to get all the kids in at some point. So yeah, it's just that hybrid model is a great concept on paper. It can work out on paper. When you start looking at your custodial costs, the bodies that you need to make sure you clean the way in which the state is asking us to clean, transportation costs, food services, substitute teachers or teaching staff to make sure you have enough people in the building to work with the kids, nursing staff. The list goes on and on.
Yeah. Andrew.
Yes, we just had a listener call up. He was a father, and he and his wife work 8 to 5, and he wondered if, parents were there was a survey done for parents with regard to making the decision to delay the opening of schools.
We didn't survey parents specifically on whether or not they wanted to do the delayed process. We've had 2 parent surveys go out, one in July, one in early August, and both were geared towards, do you want your child to be back in person learning to some degree, or do you want to stay completely remote? And again, our plan for the entire summer was trying to find a way to get our K-6 students back in person 5 days a week. And then when we started looking at as I've said, the survey results overwhelmingly parents want their kids to be in school, which I certainly understand, and I think the kids want to be in school.
Yeah.
The difference is what they want and what in their head they envision are not the same things as the reality when you start looking at what we're required to do. What we're required to do does not make sense relative to the general population and community. If you just go out in public right now, the standards that we're held to for maintaining the school building are far stricter than most places of the general society. So we understand that daycare or childcare for working families is going to be a challenge. It was going to be a challenge anyways in the hybrid model.
Yeah.
Instead of needing daycare for 3 days a week, unfortunately, folks need it for 5 days. And we are working with many local agencies. I had a great email from a daycare provider yesterday saying that she can help organize the some daycares in town to work with families. Obviously, our local YMCA is a great asset and resource for our community. So we'll do everything we can to support those families and work and help to make sure that the kids have a place to go.
Do you think the next step is because all this falls back on the restrictions that are being placed on schools, just as you're saying. That I think we have to focus on here, that in order to accomplish the goal of getting kids back in place and the restrictions, it becomes the great conundrum. Do you think that the answer is going to be, if the virus continues to decrease and we don't get that push in the fall, everybody wears a mask, everybody is back at the same time?
I would hope so. On a personal level, that would be what I would hope for. I don't understand why we're telling people they have to wear masks and they have to socially distance all of the time. That's not how the general public is operating right now. Daycare providers since the spring have been fully open with no masks and no socially distancing with 2, 3, 4-year-olds. So I don't understand why. And the community doesn't get it either, right? They're not paying attention to all the news. If it doesn't affect them, they're not going to really be in tune to it. So you start looking at those things, and it becomes an issue. And one thing I'll point out that the light bulb went off for me yesterday when the governor was talking about bowling alleys and gymnasiums or gyms. School districts right now, we're the only agency that I'm aware of that has not been told someone's going to be inspecting our properties to make sure we're complying with all the state health safety guidelines. You've got police going into bars and restaurants, and gyms are going to be signed off on before they're allowed to open. But schools, there's been no mention of anybody inspecting if we're following the rules. I don't understand that if you're talking about your kids' safety and health across the state. But
would it have been
that's
easier?
Another factor.
Would it have been easier if a plan was put in place by the state in early July, and then it was modified, customized for each district? You then could have had a couple of months to get ready for this versus just a few weeks. I think that becomes a big problem. The second part is I would assume your decision is not as much about the virus. And for those saying, well, why is he so afraid of the virus? Our numbers are down. It's not as much about the virus as it is the restrictions that the state is imposing on schools.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that's a personal opinion type of matter, right? If you're afraid of the virus or if you're not afraid of the virus, on a personal level, Peter Blake, the person, believes that it's safe for kids to be in school. I think kids should be able to go to school, wear a mask all day. Don't worry about social distancing. If you do your best to get it there, but don't fret over it, and you do your best to clean things as you go through, just as if you went to the grocery store or if you went to the gas station, wherever it might be. That's my personal opinion, but my job doesn't matter. My personal opinion doesn't matter with my job. My job is to make sure that our community is educated in a safe and healthy manner. And so when you start looking at the restrictions that we're needing to follow, unless we want to bust the budget, it's just not
going to happen. Peter Blake, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and good luck moving forward here.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. You guys be well.
Yep, you do the same.